Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. We are thrilled to be at the ICS conference this year. I'm Bob Foley. This is will be a little bit less restrictive on what we're covering, but the goal is to share with you an experience we had working with a natural gas company and their rollout, deployment, and use of an OT cybersecurity solution. I'm with a company called Sentryo. Sentryo was started in 2014. The founder, Terry Roquet, is sitting here in the front row. We are a vendor, so if I slip into vendor type speak, somebody poke me. I don't want to sell you anything today. A lot of things I talk about are solutions and things that can be done by other vendors that are here. So this is designed not to be a sales pitch. Company is headquartered in Lyon, France. We formed a U.S. subsidiary, incorporated this year. So this actually is the first formal show we've been to as Sentryo in North America, and we're thrilled to be here with ICS. Our target industrial sectors are pretty obvious in this space: energy, transportation, manufacturing. We have partnerships with organizations around the world to support us, support our customers, and integrate our product, such as our partnership with Siemens. And we have offices in France, Germany, USA. So a lot of these themes you're hearing over and over during this week. But to give you a context of how we see the world out there we're trying to serve, security officers have a number of challenges: limited visibility over their assets and devices, limited interaction between OT and IT staff members, resources potentially limited, even if it's not limited by like cash, finding people's limited. I'm sure that whether you're on the vendor side or on the user side, it's very hard to find experienced OT cybersecurity people. And if you find them, they're quite expensive. And of course, there's a limited time to be able to make changes and do things in an organization that's moving ahead, manufacturing, moving oil and gas, et cetera. But you're being driven by things like digitization, Industry 4.0. There are attacks, internal, external, that you've got to deal with. Regulatory pressure is certainly rising. We see it a lot in Europe. The EU is doing a lot in that space, and we're seeing it worldwide. And of course, board level awareness. I'm not sure the board level awareness always translates to practicality, because in many cases they want you to do something, but not sure what that something is. So utility industries, I don't know if anybody here is from any of the utility industries, and some of the things we'll talk about will relate across industry types, but this project happened to be in a utility. So we're going to talk specifically today about gas, but water, electricity, oil and gas have similar kind of challenges. They're complex organizations. They deliver their material across very wide stretches of geography. They have many, many points of presence down to your house and to big other distribution points. Usually public-private ownership, which adds to the complexity. And the lifetime of the infrastructures, if that pump has been running the last 20 years, we ought to try to get another 20 out of it. Water distribution as an example, even though we're going to talk about gas today, some of the same qualities in terms of they've got to capture the product, they've got to store it somewhere, ship it, pressurize that in some way, push it out. And in their case, they also have to deal with old water. So they've got to deal with wastewater usually and process that. So we're going to talk about gas. I think we all probably take many things for granted that come right to our house that we use. But the process of getting gas out of the ground, shipping it to somewhere, storing it, pressurizing it, and getting it to your house is quite complex. Involves many interconnected industrial processes. This project we're going to talk about was about 3,000 miles of pipeline. The one for U.S., over 300,000 miles of interstate, and interstate transmission pipes, and then the next level of getting it to your house is another 2.1 million miles. And all along the way, there are various devices that need to be managed if you own this as an OT cybersecurity officer. So some of the risk vectors that overlap with all industries, but that are somewhat unique to them. Number one, they certainly represent a significant target, whether it's for disgruntled employees, nation states, hacktivists. If you're shipping oil and gas, obviously the potential for something tragic to happen is a bit larger than if you're just manufacturing maybe a food product. Both are important, but there's somewhat different risk. A gas power plant blowing up. Once in my life, I happened to see the result of a backhoe hitting a natural gas pipeline. And it was in the evening time. I was driving across a flat part of the country, and the sky was just glowing. And I thought something had happened maybe 5 miles away. A backhoe had hit a pipeline about 70 miles away from where I was. And the amount of, even though they have ways to shut the pumps down at either end and shut them down, how much gas is in there to pipe to burn off? And it took quite a long time to burn that off. Luckily, the backhoe operator seemed to come out of it okay. And it was in the middle of a field somewhere. So they're open fields. When we talk about inventory covering only 50% of facilities, in most cases, it's a very manual way of keeping track of what kind of devices they have, what release level they are, if they've been patched recently, et cetera. The physical locations are spread out across a long way. Picture, it's not as obvious because gas pipelines are buried, but picture electrical utilities, how often you see substations. Gas pipelines are similar. They need pressure pumping stations along the way to keep the pressure up in the lines as friction slows down the gas from moving. Why is that jumping ahead? Well, they have long life cycles of, memorize this slide right here. Everybody have this one? Because it's going to jump any time now. They do a lot of subcontracting. So there it jumped. So a lot of challenges in this distributed environment they have of complex systems. And of course, regulations. The regulatory environment, I think we saw the biggest push was a number of years ago, electrical. Certainly in Europe now, it's going across utilities. So gas, water, et cetera, are being regulated heavily. We're involved with a project right now in Australia where the government has stepped in and they're being very active in requirements for the water industry, for example. So this is a big driver. Okay, it didn't jump ahead that time. So the business we're going to talk about today is a gas operator in Western European Union. I won't name the company, but they have 600 distribution sites, 3,000 miles, 6 compressor stations. Okay. I saw people take pictures of these slides as they go and stay on it. Now I went too far back. Okay. And they have 120, is this me? Or they have 120 clients. And when you think of clients, these aren't the ones that deliver it to you. They deliver to the equivalent would be they deliver to the gas company who I pay my bills to in Indiana. Right, so they deliver to them. I'm not touching this. So they deliver the gas to those companies and then bring it to you. That's that 2.1 million miles of pipe I saw. There they are. And they also deliver to some big plants and things. So what are the risk vectors for the gas business? Okay, in the wild, remote locations, very little physical protection, theoretically. You could dig down about 6 feet and take a pickaxe and open up that pipe. In many cases, the connection back from some of those stations to their center is a very low bandwidth connection or maybe almost no connection. Limited communications. They do have a centralized control room where they can turn pumps on, off, change pressure in pressure stations. Very long life cycle. And there's little cybersecurity awareness of their maintenance staff. Yeah, that was me. So this customer's technical objectives, they wanted to be able to establish and maintain an up-to-date inventory of all their OT devices and other IT equipment, including those that had limited to no communications. So even though it's a pressure pumping station out in the middle of nowhere, they wanted to be able to have, it's really irritating. They wanted to be able to have information about those. They wanted to identify vulnerabilities so they could stay ahead of the risk associated with those vulnerabilities. And they wanted an anomaly intrusion protection system built in, both at the perimeter and most critical parts. So this customer in their analysis said, we have different risk at different levels. We want to apply resources, both people and product, to those risk areas differently. So the very end point where they're bringing gas to your house is a different risk than the big storage areas. So they wanted to be able to manage those in two different ways with one solution. They wanted to be able to have the SOC not only manage IT, but OT, assets, information, et cetera, build a shared platform and report incidents of cybersecurity. From a business perspective, they wanted to, at minimum, stay compliant with industry regulations, and they're growing. But they also had, and maybe your organization has this, they wanted to establish themselves with a reputation as being an industry leader in protecting their assets and the citizens of France. I mean, they were very committed to being seen as a leader. And also because it's gas and it has implication for carbon footprint and things, they wanted to show they were a good resource manager of that resource. Internally, they didn't have any OT cybersecurity experts. OT, yes. IT, yes. They made a decision that they would try to utilize existing employees as much as possible. From a structural perspective, because I know this affects a lot of you, they have had and have both a CIO and a CISO. They're peer levels. The CISO doesn't report to the CIO. And this project fell under the CISO's responsibility and budget. The OT-IT teams historically have not worked, I shouldn't say haven't worked well together, they haven't tried to work well together. It has not been a relationship. And they knew that they had to bring value to both. They had to have the OT people get value out of whatever solution they put in because of the historical perception of lack of value the OT people got from IT people. I don't know if you have that in your organization, but usually the OT people's attitude is the IT people are doing things to me or making me do things that I don't want to do. Hang on, going the wrong way. So they spent some time reviewing their requirements and available technologies. One requirement was they had to be able to work in low and intermittent bandwidth connections or no connection environments. They decided to make their OT engineers very involved in owning and managing this process. So they knew there'd be a lot of training involved in taking these OT experienced people and making them the cybersecurity front end people. And they had to be able to integrate with existing tools they had. In their case, this was RSA NetWitness as their SIM, and there were some other integration points as well. So we went to the market to look around. You're probably doing the same thing, or you have done the same thing. They obviously eliminated some. Not everybody's a good fit. Some vendors didn't have the flexibility about the architecture and the geographic kind of coverage they needed in terms of covering the pipeline situation they had and where they had to put their sensors. Some didn't have a solution for low, no bandwidth kind of environments. Not all vendors support all protocols. By the way, Sentryo doesn't either, right, Terry? But we're trying to. The list grows every day. And then obviously full rollout seemed very daunting for them, so they were very cautious in how they were going to proceed. So they made a technology choice, but they were going to be very cautious in terms of piloting, doing testing first, and walking very slowly before they made a long-term commitment. They wanted to have multiple form factors for their sensors. either physical appliance, an application running like on a PC, maybe embedded in another device. They had to be able to do offline mode, that is data capture, and get it in a more manual way back to the centralized management system. They had to be able to cope with both non-critical and critical sites. They wanted value to the control engineer, so they needed a visual interface that when the control engineer saw it, viewed their network and their environment differently than they were able to before. So they could tune things and make their environment work more effectively because of this tool. They also wanted a universal OT language. That is, a lot of products like this can present a complex, heterogeneous, vendor-based environment in a language that one engineer can understand without necessarily being an expert on Siemens or Rockwell or Schneider or Yokogawa systems. The product needed to be able to standardize that into a language when they looked at the information being presented made sense to them. And they wanted to have a low-risk rollout where they could proceed in a relatively test, rollout environment. The architecture they chose, pretty straightforward. Like many of these, there were online sensors deployed at physical sites. Certainly the critical sites had online sensors with real-time connectivity. They used offline sensors to collect data, and I'll touch more on that in a moment. They tied into their SIM back at the SOC, and the SOC was now getting more information to help tune their environment. So I mentioned integration with your industrial control processes, so they rely on the same topology as the SCADA system they have now. It's centrally operated and controlled by the same management team. They get a new, better look, but a similar look geographically and functionally to the environment they had. Full integration with RSA, NetWitness, and SIM. And obviously that's important for any of these kind of environments. We're not going to run isolated. Nobody takes a product like the one we represent or the other ones like ours and runs them without integrating with other kinds of tools. For low criticality, they couldn't do permanent monitoring, so we talked about offline. Then they upload that data. The other thing is they wanted to manage false positives. Not even false positives. We were talking to someone this morning, and when you put a product like this in, if you're not careful, it isn't just false positives. You're getting a flood of information that the control engineers don't have experience or time to process. So it's important to provide the right information to the right people, whether it's the SOC people or the control engineers, that brings them value without wasting their time. And that's a huge challenge. So what about low bandwidth and no bandwidth sites? Now this is where I'm going to go into one of my ranting. This is where Terry will probably leave because you go out for a run someday and you start thinking about a business or whatever, and you start getting new ideas that are kind of out there. But so an issue that many of our clients have in their regular day-to-day operations is low bandwidth, no bandwidth sites. Either they can't get a sensor out to where they need to get it to, or the sensor can't connect back using traditional communication methods. They don't want to pay money to put a sensor. There are a lot of reasons why they may not be able to gather data at the point you would think you'd want to gather it, but they still need that data. That was the case with this client on a more limited scale, but if you look at the 300,000 miles of pipe in the US, you could see that'd be a broader issue as you're rolling out across that kind of environment. This is a relatively small 3,000 mile environment. So one of the original pilot phases was using something called a mobile kit, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have something new we're launching called Cloud Edition. And I say we, and again, this technology may be available from other people, so I'm talking about a technology as opposed to a vendor. So what they did was, for their initial piloting, is it's literally a sensor and what we call a center, where the data goes to actually present it in a great visual way to everybody in the environment. It's in a box, and you take it out to the plant, or you take it to that pressure pumping station, and you put it online for 20 minutes, gather data, maybe take it off with a USB stick, and take it back. All right, so it's completely manual, no complex installation of sensors somewhere to gather data. And we're doing the same thing now with our cloud edition, which I'll talk about in a moment. But what that allows you to do is, in a very low-cost, simple way, go out and see if this works, see what kind of data you're gathering. Because the first thing for most clients is purely visibility. Every client we work with, the first thing they really care about is seeing something. Every pilot we do, when we go out to that client site and we put our sensor out there for that first time, and a couple of them, they've been environments that are beautiful, big screen TV, and the plant engineers are there, and the IT guys from headquarters are there. They're sitting in different sides, by the way. And the guys with steel-toed shoes and hard hats, they're all in there. And for the first time ever, they look up and they see a map of all their devices and what they're connecting to and things. They're looking down at an Excel spreadsheet with IP addresses, trying to see if that matches up to what they thought they had. And 100% of the time, would you say, Terry, they find that they didn't know what they had. They didn't know what was talking to what. So the first thing is visibility, and a kit like this provides that. So with Cloud Edition, we're taking the next step, which is we're saying, let's put the actual center where all the data comes back from one plant or all the plants or the pressure stations and the gas storage facilities, and let's put that in the cloud. That cloud can be hosted by a company like ours. It can be hosted by one of our business partners who may also do some other managed services. It could be hosted in an internal cloud in your organization. And then in terms of gathering data, let's not constrain ourselves to the idea of a sensor. We could put a physical sensor out there. We could have somebody with a PC out there running Wireshark gathering data and sending it back. We could have somebody physically walk around, take a USB stick into a PC, bring it back and upload it from a PC. So a variety of ways of getting data from that remote site, move it up to our center, and then make it available with permission rights to everybody from the plant engineer to the SOC to maybe your partner who's providing valued services to you. So it's a new thing we're kind of playing around with, because what you're getting is the visibility that you care about, the vulnerability assessments you care about, without making as big an investment. So this takes me down then to where I get off this reservation. So the Cloud Edition implications for all businesses. Okay, so it's pretty obvious if you've got a gas pipeline 300,000 miles long, that might be good for you. But it has implications for other businesses, because as much as how all the vendors who are out there, including us, probably tell you that it's easy to deploy this stuff, well, it's not that easy. It's complicated. I would say we're at this early stage where there aren't many full-scale implementations, right? I mean, when's the last time you talked to an organization that had 80 plants and they've deployed something like this to 60 or 20 or 10? There are a lot of POCs, a lot of people are trying it, a lot of complexity. First, it's a replacement technology. I mean, it's new technology, not replacement. So we're not taking out last year's antivirus, putting in a new antivirus. We're rolling out new technology in relatively hostile environments for this kind of technology. There can be budget issues, and if it isn't direct budget cost of buying a product like this, it's all the support costs that are associated with it. Hard to find good staff, internally or externally, and expensive when you do. OT, IT friction of them not getting along well. So one of the things that we've been kind of playing around with in Cloud Edition is a step in that direction is, should we as vendors and customers be focusing on ease of deployment instead of new features or rolling out these features? That is, you can go out there right now from about 5 vendors I can name right now that look like us. And they've got a lot of nice features, and we've got a lot. Trust me, if you want to buy a feature, we've got one, got features. But features sitting on your shelf aren't doing you any good. We're working with a client right now that has 102 plants. They've done 2 significant POCs. They know our product very well. And we're as easy to deploy as anybody else. And they said, yeah, we're moving ahead. We think we can roll out to 4 to 6 plants this year, the next 12 months. That's not 46, that's 4 to 6. They have 102 plants. Hopefully the pace will pick up so we get deployed before 2040. But I think you're all facing that same kind of thing. So part of what we're playing around with, like Cloud Edition, and maybe there'll be a movement more this direction, is maybe visibility and vulnerability analysis initially would be a good first step. Not our fully featured, do everything, real-time monitoring, every second looking for a deviation from a baseline. The same customer with 102 plants, after the first POC, they told us, if we could scan every one of our plants every 30 days with your product, we'd be way ahead of where we are right now, and we'd be thrilled. That's not the model we sell, though. Our model we sell is real-time cybersecurity scanning. You've got to protect yourself. But, you know, in the IT world, we didn't roll out the solutions we have today, day one. We rolled out firewalls, and then we rolled out antivirus, and then we layered on other things. So one thing that we're talking more about, and I'm not saying we have the answer, I'm not saying this is the solution for the world, but maybe we ought to think more about what can we do to easily, you know, would you rather have vulnerability and visibility to 102 plants in the next 12 months or full protection for 4 to 6 plants in the next 12 months with a similar rollout? You know, I'm just throwing it out there as an idea that is in my head, that maybe we ought to focus more on ease of deploying something like this, getting it out there, actively supporting without the full depth and breadth of what it can do. So feature-rich shelfware is not providing any level of protection. If you want to buy our fully featured product, by the way, we got a booth out here and we're selling it, and we'd like to sell it to you. But on the other hand, I'd like to talk more about, is there a way to provide levels of protection in an easy to deploy and manage way looking forward? And I think maybe there'll be more talk about that. And maybe our Cloud Edition is something that'll get people talking in that direction. So I sorry to mean to digress from my natural gas story, but I warned you I was going to do this. So what do we learn from our natural gas customer? And we've got, by the way, we have other, you know, when you're in the space, you have success in one, you find some others that are doing the same thing. You know, everybody thinks the best prospect is just like the last customer they got. So we're doing more in this utilities area. But I think a high-level risk assessment is vital. Identify the most critical parts of your system and take those on because you'll get the most return there. We think that visibility is key. You know, we probably have changed our messaging a lot more about visibility than OT cybersecurity in the last 2 years because the value we see our customers finding. I will say this, interestingly enough, the control engineers who've been trained in this environment to support our product, they've embraced it. They've liked the education they're getting out of it. So they're enjoying it, and they like this new role they had. And I think the initial thought was there'd be resistance to doing this. Maybe they think it's helping keep the IT guys out of their space, I'm not sure, but they're enjoying having this. And got to be, you know, take real data, real issues in the field, be pragmatic, and be hands-on as opposed to theoretical. So that's kind of an update on our utilities experience and my ranting about deploying in a more broad way for visibility. Any questions? Anybody think my visibility is a good idea? No? I think a question's coming from the back. I don't know, is that? Yeah, okay. I think so.
Maybe a little off topic, but I'm curious because of European law and GDPR. Were you running into any issues in France as far as data privacy and within your system going to the cloud?
You ask a great question, and the right person to answer it is Terry, if you could. Because you know the EU stuff way more than I do. I'm Mike this way, so you may want to grab that one. Yeah.
On peut parler en français si tu veux.
This is Terry Roquet.
He's French, so he says that we can speak French, but I'm not sure that everyone else will be able to understand. So the question was about the GDPR implementation. So yes, the cloud edition that Bob had just mentioned is not available yet. Just it will be announced by the end of the year, and obviously we will be compliant with the GDPR law. And as Bob explained, this is also a way for the European country to be compliant with the new NIS European directive.
Thanks, Jerry. Any others? If not, thank you for your time. I've enjoyed being with you. Take care.